And I'm asking directly Tara Hill to come on stage. I will just say some words about her work now. Tara spent half of her life with on food in the global techno movement and the other in its critical reflection, first as fascinated raver and music journalist, later as a DJ and creator of temporary club projects, as well as keen reporter on the underground scene for Swiss and German dailies, magazines and blogs, nowadays as activist merging academic research and transcendental empiricism. And her project and her presentation's title is Politics of Ecstasy, Negotiating the Sacred in Contemporary Club Culture. So Tara, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Starting this festival with a presentation on Pirate Utopia, the politics of ecstasy, might seem a weird thing, but in my life I have been meticulously studying the dance floor as a primal scene of ecstatic culture, as one of the nucleus of society, as a music journalist, as a DJ, but also now as a sociologist for the University of Hamburg. So my approach was first the one of an autodidact, and actually going and synchronizing several different festival experience, ethnography into a more personal cosmology, a belief system, and then negotiating different approaches to think the festival throughout the world. Hopefully this critical process will by definition be non-doctrinaire, non-hierarchical and anti-dogmatic. So this is how I work. The festival is a scenery that has caught my interest because compared to a very cult classic Deleuzian chapter of 1,000 plateaus, becoming animal, becoming imperceptible and becoming intense, it can also be structured as becoming one, is a very important feature of the dance floor, then becoming multiple, and maybe in a third step, becoming an agent of change. So this is because there's something innately powerful about the moment, especially the moment the dance floor erupts. It is as if all of a sudden some synchronizing force takes over the scene. The tableau turns into a threshold, in Latin limen, which coins the term liminality. What emerges is a plafond, a morphing and oscillating assemblage between music, people, scenery, and union intensity. Even more so if we think geophilosophically, if the scenery we encounter does not play out in the darkness of a club, but in the outdoors. This is where the scenery really plays an important role. So this is what makes it a sacred space belonging to no one, and this might be the start of a progressive politics structured after affects and feelings of the experience of the participant. Liminality denotes a plateau of intensity experienced by festival goers in which the aggregate state changes, novelty begins, and haxeity, understood as a concept by John Duns Scotus, is the individuality of a moment ensues. It's everything melts into a body without organs. Of course, at festivals with 70,000 or more visitors, such as the infamous Black Rock City at the Burning Man Festival, or the German Fusion Festival, which I have extensively studied. We speak about the size of a middle census city, which makes them a powerful player and a festival that reaches critical mass yet remains firmly steeped in the heterotopia or in the alternative culture. When crowd experience collective meltdowns and states of euphoria, what happens is it powerfully breaks down the walls between its members and turns them into a collectivity, a multitude of the moment. They become one, which marks a culture of the now, of the moment, which is a hexaity in itself. So it's a tableau where everything melts, and this points to some transcendental spark. So they reach out to infinity or eternity, or become a cosmological scene. In this environment, collective joy, jouissance, experienced as rite of passage and as a form of countercultural bonding, acts as a form of what Adorno called as a promesse de bonheur. The scene opens into the utopia, and making another or a better world suddenly seem powerfully possible. So people that attend these festivals can become vectors of transformation, realizing that they have cathartic purges there at the festival, and maybe go back changed, sparking unthinkable new politics. Cathartic crowds enmeshed in the ecstatic dance state have always been studied meticulously by anthropologists first, then later by sociologists, and one of the things that is important about them is that they actually cater to the initiate. So they're traditionally not open to everyone, but is certain stages in life people might actually accept an invitation to become an adept or an initiate, which makes them a sort of occult or magic experience. So one of the first initiates they actually has very, very high prevalence and has extensively been debated in the 1968 movement was Timothy Leary, who was a Harvard professor deeply involved in progressive politics and in the use of psychedelic drugs in the hippie generation. And he coined his book, The Politics of Ecstasy, by which he means the experience of attaining freedom from limitations, either self-imposed or external, and a state of exalted delight in which normal understanding is felt to be surpassed. It's from the Greek, ekstasis, and it's an ongoing on-off process. So it requires not only one crystalline moment, but a continual sequence of dropping out. On the same occasion, when many individuals share the ecstatic experience at the same time, they create a brief-lived counterculture of their own. Of course, one of the very legendary examples would be Woodstock Festival, 500,000 people strong, that sometimes has become the iconic event of the 1960 or 70 movements. Another sort of anarchist, more or outsider thinker that has become very important for technoculture is Hakim Bey, which sort of he melts between his anarchist role and the role of a storyteller, producing also sort of theory fiction he called guerrilla ontology. And he's interested in where do we actually find places where we can suddenly create our own utopian ideals as a freedom-loving, progressive, anarchist society. The temporary autonomous zone is that what he coined and he seeks. And he says it's utopian in the sense that it envisions an intensification of everyday life, but also life's penetration by the marvelous. But it's not utopian in that it doesn't exist. So what he did is he started to study the tasks that he followed, intersections of many forces, compared them to like some pagan power spot at junctions, and stressed the importance of the terrain, landscape, flow, air, water, animals involved in these temporary autonomous zones. What happens is that in temporary autonomous zones, a sort of place or scenery or even a small village, so a territory suddenly takes off from mainstream society, forming a sort of in-between space of possibly complete autonomy. And this is a place where people then might slip into different and new identities, ways of being and relating, becoming fluid and wild in ways that usually are constrained on the surface of mainstream reality. So there are lots and lots of examples of how to think the temporary autonomous zone. I want to send on Pirate Utopias. Pirate Utopias is a book that he wrote in which he traced different pirate settlings that sort of formed mini-utopian settling, often centered around their very autonomous or countercultural rights. So he stresses their festive aspects and they're slipping loose of the ideals of a mainstream society. So what happens is they are freed of time and place of usual roles, of usual morals and power structure, and are more an event-based society. So they usually psychotopology-wise indicate that the flow of forces is very free, and then they become spots of power through this festive culture they coin. So one of the things he studies is that a counterculture refuse mainstream culture, but on the other hand, they often coin or they create a festal culture that actually emerges in zones that usually are non-territorial. So zones from the margins, traditionally not from the high arts, somewhere around major networks or major metropolis, and remain hidden from view. So there, the fight for the right to party is in fact not a parody of the radical structure, but a new manifestation of it. So one of the strengths that these pirate utopias have is they stay invisible to the state. They can't recognize it because they don't really have a definition of it. So they are often semi-permanent leases, or there's word of mouth, or they are arranged by handshake, or just by settling somewhere in a spot that has opened up. So what happens is it has often flourishes, and everything that happens there is sort of a secret. Like the initiation is compared to a cult, and they are very experimentative, so they try out new forms of society, often based on the ecstatic. So this means that pirate utopias can become microcosms of that anarchist dream of a free culture already practiced. This is what makes them really interesting. They are otherworldly in a sense that they create complete new utopian societies, and they are enclaves of pure freedom as long as they remain invisible or stay under the radar or fly off kilt. So some of these pirate utopias can be compared to the first tribal gatherings, but also anarchist meetings or nightclubs. But of course they become more and more powerful when they reach thousands or even 10,000s of celebrants, like a being, because ecstatic culture practice in pirate utopias is always open. It is ordered by sound, by the territory, but it is open to what happens within the zone. So there is something new happening. This is Black Rock City, seen from above. It's a Burning Man festival. One of the most powerful pirate utopias that has been extensively studied, and I will perform similar studies for European festivals that have reached similar critical mass. Why are these festival grounds so utopian and so autonomous, and why do they have such huge repercussions for mainstream society? Here we can go back to actually the Hellenic phase and quote Cicero, who has compared the Eleusinian mysteries of that time, that also was a ritual culture, a festive culture, somewhere like 20 kilometers off Athens, where people came to experience freedom through music and dancing and the performance of the spectacle of the tragedy, which also has inspired Nietzsche's first book, The Birth of Tragedy from music. So he compares that these Eleusinian mysteries have actually refined the state of the civilization they come from, and they are powerful initiations. So they actually let people learn from these new beginnings of life and new forms of society. And people who have visited the Eleusinian mysteries have gained the power not only to live happily, but also to die with a better hope. So, coming from the antique, there has been quite some research in the past 20 years on how to think this return of the tragic, or of the tragedy, or of the mystery, Mysterienspiel in postmodern societies. One of them is the French sociologist Michel Mephistoli, the one who also coined the term neotribes, and he stresses the culture of pleasure, the sense of tragic, the confrontation with destiny, and both the cause and the effect of an ethics of the moment. And this actually marks a very important part of postmodern culture, which then actually finds its astonishing return of archaic values to the forefront of the social scene. So things like tribalism and nomadism, that technomadism has been extensively studied. So this makes the festival one of the very important places to study such new form of the re-emergence of the archaic. One of the festivals I have extensively studied is Fusion Festival, and we can actually see in a German festival, in a very recent example of how these things happen. Fusion Festival has been flying under the radar for almost 22 years. It's based on an old Soviet rocket station, so a rocket launch station, which is coined the name and also all its symbols. And it has been a well-kept secret, not indulging in PR or marketing of any sorts, and they never ever put out a lineup. So you just go there every year, and in the end, nowadays there are 70,000 people. And the interesting thing is that there are about 500,000 people who would like to go. So they don't just give away the tickets. It's just one big Wettbewerb. So you can just go on the internet and then type in your name, and maybe you're lucky and you win, or maybe you have to go next year. So what happened is with some political changes in the area, there were new forces in the police that thought it was time that this event had created a critical mass, and actually realized that there was virtually no police stationed on the festival ground, which is of course a really special situation compared to football games. So what they wanted was they demanded a new security concept, actually putting the police on the grounds of the festival. And this, of course, in the eyes of the Fusion Festival Committee, would have hampered with its idea of a completely autonomous zone, where people can roam around freely and have no rules applying to mainstream, normal, everyday society. So this was a big discussion last summer in German newspapers and even TV stations. And in the end, they reached a compromise. So there was some police stationed in the beginning, just at the entrance, and actually it proved that it wasn't necessary. I think they had like 7 or 8 different Einsätze, so things to do, and it was all minor. So in future, the hope persists, that actually the future festival will remain an autonomous zone. So this shows that actually the battle between a nation state trying to see that its rules are followed in an increasingly networked society can be overcome through temporary autonomous zones. So this is what I'm looking at in my PhD more closely from different examples. And I want to see how exactly this happens, these negotiations of temporary autonomous zones, and how they become precarious laboratories of ordered social disorder and civil disobedience and resistance against mainstream culture. So the relation to the state of these festivals is often a complex one, because where wiser men, especially older politicians or even the ex-police chief who is retired, see that they perform a very important social role as to setting a stage where people can experience freedom for a short time. So it's important for the people partaking as an initiation, but also to test new social initiatives and to see whether a grassroots self-regulating society is possible in a temporary way. So as in Eleusis, the Eleusinian mysteries, that performs this important role for Athens, for the mainstream culture of the Hellenic age, we can say there are very numerous initiatives coined in between these temporary autonomous zones, then going back to Berlin and to Berlin's club cultures, there is a very vivid exchange and interaction. So ideas circulate that might prove to be better suited in the club culture of the capital, and then others that go beyond that, inspired by maybe the approaches also of Burning Man, where there is no money, and where they leave no trace. Ideas like that can become tested here in Germany also. So Graham St. John, who will also speak here later at this conference, is one of the doyens and the most respected researcher on festival culture internationally. He started with Psytrance, and he has written extensively about Burning Man and its contributions to a progressive politics and a new society. He says trance events have an uncanny ability to capture an era, captivate an audience of travelers, occupying the eternal theater of the dance floor. Their tendency is to thwart the passage of time, to prolong the night, and for these people attending, then maybe after adopt a liminal lifestyle for a longer period of time. So amid the whole carnival, there is also peaceful repose. You have limbs, bodies, sunflowers, everything melting around into one, producing intense joy in the on the dance floor and the surrounding areas. This enables people to experience the moment, the flow, the experience you are all, and the living evidence also that nothing lasts. And it's a deep revelation of the mystical function of trance for society, and it's difficult to emerge from this little death, as it is called, because you reach a new state of being, feeling, and leave your old self behind. And also a lot of people experience intense euphoria, so they don't want the party to end. But it must end so that it can recommence and close the cycle. And this is because festival culture is liminal time mostly, but first and foremost liminal space. So it means we go on a journey, we form a camp, and we perform all of these typical elements of what's in the sacred is called a vision quest or a rite of passage. There's the three states. First, you go separation from your normal life. Then you go on a journey, meeting new people, meeting new experience, being in the in-between or transitory states. And then you reach the threshold where you leave your old self behind, plunging into the precarious wide open, and thus losing your old self, and returning a new person or a new being. And as the Dionysian element is key to the ecstatic, then this marks a process which is very wild and chaotic, and in the end turns then into a powerful initiation through euphoria and trance. This is Boom Festival, which Graham Syndrome has studied. So what are the lessons taken from these experiences? It's actually really through the perfectly orchestration of the liminal, that is the design of the stages, the music, the lights, the people occupying all sorts of job, intermediary, the whole gastronomic concept, the village around, the infrastructure. It's become huge hubs catering to this sacred spectacle. And it's actually meant for a week to be such an intense experience that, akin to some archaic or indigenous spiritual festivals like Sundance, the exhaustion of the people is part of the ecstatic, so that bodily boundaries might be crossed, social roles might be transgressed, and again they experience a little death, and in Burning Man they burn a little figure of themselves in the end, so to have some symbolic closure of the ritual. What happens after people leave festivals? This points to the process of the reintegration of the initiate back into its society. In traditional societies, the liminal subject, the one that is attending a rite of passage, is characterized as polluting. In a sense, he powerfully crosses the taboos of purity and is therefore temporarily stripped of his former social status. So he is a bit like a homo sacer, is an outlaw, and he belongs nowhere. His old status has vanished, and the new one he becomes at the end of a successful initiation. This is, of course, a very interesting concept, because the status of being betwixt or in between has been traditionally ascribed to shamans, drawbacks, outcast, marginalized people, minority, and of course agents of counterculture. So usually what happens in these mystery games or ecstatic dance in traditional society is you have a ritual, and then you have a closure moment that everything stays there. The circle closes, and there is silence, there is a vow of taboo of what happens, and then, like in Burning Man, a lot of these traditional festivals actually just vanish, so they try to leave no trace. Also thinking of the ecological systems of the sacred space. Now, we face a different situation, that actually this cycle doesn't really close. So we experience festivals go back into maybe metropolis or big city. I find there our normal club culture as a sort of mixture between a home away from home, so a small circle of community, and that also performs ecstatic rites. And it is very interesting that now in the past couple of decades there are forming circles that want to actually take this festival experience into the midst of the city and make it a new sprout or germ for a new society, actually founding on the experience of the ecstatic together. So what happens is, through these powerful becoming ones, the people that have partaken in these rituals or in these places, they found the society on this dance floor moment. And from this, they sprout out several initiatives to actually spread this experience of oneness, of up to other concepts, to one world concepts, or to concepts of like peace, love, unity, respect, or to the concepts of a political resistance and micropolitics. So what I will do in the next couple of years is actually trace how these concepts have filtered back into club culture. Do they render club culture more political? Is this really possible to just found a new society on temporary autonomous zones, such as clubs, big club projects, or now temporary autonomous zones in big cities. And we'll have a look at different different projects that actually try to use this experience of the festival not just as a pollutive one, but as a cross-pollination one. So actually what we have achieved is we have defended several of these temporary autonomous zones. So they have a certain critical weight now, which is the moment where the taboo about the initiation and about these rights might be dropped to actually become a powerful political voice about the chances of these ecstatic communities becoming powerful negotiators of how to live in a largely stratified, hierarchical and very complex mainstream society. So if we look at these small villages, there's projects like the Holzmark, for instance, have started, or even a club project like Griesmühle, which is at the moment just trying to fight to prolong what they have built up in Neukölln. We can powerfully trace these micro-politics that really become very, very important social initiatives, sometimes, as the last couple of years have shown, then really being agents of major political change through ecstatic ritual. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Amazing, thank you so much, Tara. I have just a very quick question, and I will give then the questions to the audience, because you said that you're gonna work on this negotiation in your PhD. You said, I think you are in the beginning or the first phase, or like
yes, yes.
And how are you going to do that? I'm interested in this methodology. That this, I think, because in liminal spaces or in liminality, exactly this negotiation is, I think, a powerful thing to do. How are you going to measure it or analyze it between authorities and clubs and festivals and so on? Yeah.
It's a very good question, and this is why I put in the quote of the music critic, that you actually enmesh with all the aspects and then try to distill a sort of cosmological aspect or cosmological foundation out of it, and then you take these out and form archetypes, which is a bit easier than just going in and doing a discourse analysis, because many of these initiatives are really shrouded in secrecy and they don't want to come out. They don't want people to actually come in there with the cameras filming everything at the ritual, as in Berghain, who has a no photo policy, is difficult to just work with talk and text. So I think the enmeshment in the process is very important, which is of course the classical ethnographic approach of participant observation. Then to speak to key figures, our key collectives, very importantly, it's not structured hierarchically. There is no, even the DJ is not the shaman king, because these festivals, they are organized through committees that are largely made out from political activists of all sorts of backgrounds. So one important thing will be to study how these collectives work, because they are very grassroots based. A lot of it works nowadays through new social media and planning, and then they are very loose structured, so not everybody is aware of everybody else, which is important. And then you just try to trace the working of a collective, and of course then to speak to the initiate himself. There has been some rise of a blog scene around all this festival experience. There is way more information on Burning Man, because there people do preliminary courses, or when they are a virgin, they get initiated separately and come back and write tutorials or form self-help groups. So how to negotiate the experience on a more personal group level. It is what is also happening in festivals like Nowhere Festival in Spain, which is a European version, a small version of Burning Man, that you get an introduction into the principles of consent, the principles of openness, the principles of leave no trace. And at the end of the week, you can go to group help therapy and talk about how you can implement this overwhelming experience into your default life, or maybe work towards integration of the two. The other thing is that a lot of these festivals actually aid in people taking some time off and after phase, like usually in a vision quest is done. So they separate again in groups, and they go somewhere deep into unspoiled nature, liminal spaces in nature like mountains, mountain lakes, or the sea, and just go there for decompression and have some sort of purification ritual. So that is what a lot of people do to then actually gather the strength to distill the experience and go back into society as a stable, closed self again, not as someone who has become hybrid and might feel quite psychotic coming back into normal society after such an experience.
Yeah, I think Graham John will talk about it probably on Wednesday. So if you're interested in this topic, please come also on Wednesday to the discourse program. And I'm giving questions to the audience. Yes, there is one question there.
Thank you.
Could you elaborate on your work as a researcher in a scenery that is like a political action? What is your role? How do you feel like you're not a part of it, but still a part of it, to see how authentic it is? Because that is something that would be very interesting to see. Even though you told on stage you've been working on fusion and doing research there, I'm very interested in what your next steps will be and how you see yourself as a researcher in that role.
One of the more methodological problems I encountered was that I was a festival goer, also almost a tech nomad, so I was away part of the year just to go from one festival to the other, first as a music journalist usually, and then a lot of times I went into volunteering just because when I thought a festival was really special or progressive, I wanted to find out more about how it works behind the scenes. And music critics or media has always a bit of a difficult role talking to the underground. They are often misrepresented, and often they pamper with the powerful taboos of not to speak to a greater audience of what happens. So what I did was just gathered experience as volunteer, but I stated that I actually was planning a PhD that might take a couple of years to set together, and then go in and try to see the festival from a very different perspective. I have seen it as a central stage DJ, for instance, which was a very different experience than being a volunteer in the care team, or in the mindfulness-based lead before at Burning Festival. So what I'm trying is to distill all these experience and just find agents or experts on these key fields that form the backdrop of the festival, which is better than just writing to an email address that might just be the introduction to any one of the committee answering the question. And of course you can always talk to people and participants, especially the ones that are determined to put this experience into starting a new life or into progressive politics. So this is where we have to trace these events as a linear series of sprouting and spreading out into different subcommittees. This is what Graham St. John is doing very well for the worldwide effect of Burning Man. So I'm trying to do something similar for the German festival scene, and if I can, then look at the festival scene in a couple of other more remote European countries.
Any other? Yeah, there are a couple of more questions.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering if you have any practical advice for festivals, clubs and promoters, how to create that zone that you were describing, and also maybe to reach that state of transcendence, and also if you have experienced how festivals implement spiritual practices, like, I don't know, like rituals, any ceremonies that might also help to initiate that state.
It's a very important question because we actually lack a tradition, or we have been cut too far off from traditional festivity, which was very entrenched in spiritual practice. So what we need to think about is how to put these experiences that, per definition, actually transcend language. And they are, of course, bodily experiences. They are powerful experiences of even outer body experience of becoming a larger body, as a body without organs. And then people sometimes flip around afterwards, not sure how to integrate and how to speak with this experience. Their Burning Man has a very powerful tradition because it comes from these, it's very inspired by Indian rituals, festive rituals of Sundance, rain dance, and so on. And there is a very powerful community talking about the spiritual in Indian culture, so in a post-colonial way, and how we can use this insight, this spiritual insight. The same is with the quote on Afrotopia that I've taken from Frederick Nizar. This is a book by a progressive post-colonial activist, professor of economics in Africa, who works closely with the French government and how to negotiate post-colonial politics. And he has written this book, Afrotopia, because he thinks we need a new cosmology, not necessarily one that is suitable for the entire world, but Africa has rested very strongly on such tribal structures, and they are always religious or spiritual structures, and they have always been celebrated through movement. So he says this is what makes Africa actually very special, and they have a lot of expertise on that, on how to negotiate violence, troubles, social hierarchies, fights, colonial struggles, struggles between the sexes, but also diets, hunger through ritual. So this is something that we can learn from Africa because they have this tradition, and it's just actually a process of seeing the worth, the immense worth in these rituals and this ecstatic culture to form an egalitarian culture of ecstatic rituals, and what it performs in society. So he thinks we should bring together these complementary worlds of the more high culture idea world, which is very open and progressive when it comes to art or music and art festivals, just as here, but then also go and dig out huge amounts of knowledge that are around in Timbuktu, for instance, in other big library, they have been preserved. So there is maybe really much interest and much wisdom in studying these African concepts. So to ensure that these complementary worlds just don't stay parallel universes, but merge into one world, a revolution that he says is a spiritual one, or a path to spirituality, but also for the self of the individual.
Thank you. I think there are a couple of more questions, but I'm very sorry, but we don't have time to all of them. Please keep them for the final presentation, because every single person on the stage will come back again once at 6 p.m. I'm sorry about it. Yeah, we have to move to the next presentation. Thank you so much, Tara, once again.